I still remember the sound of gravel crunching that morning. It was the kind of morning that feels like a clean start, mist rising from the grass, coffee steaming on the porch. For a moment, life felt quiet again. And then, I heard engines. 3 of them. 3 SUVs rolled up my driveway, amber lights flashing like I'd accidentally wandered into a construction zone. Except this wasn't a construction zone. This was my family's cabin. A woman stepped out first, blazer sharp, hair pulled tight, clipboard in hand like it was a weapon. She pointed at me and yelled, "Get off this land right now. You don't belong here." For a few seconds, I froze. Not because I was scared, but because I genuinely didn't understand what was happening. My name is David Carter. 3 weeks ago, I inherited this cabin from my late uncle, Nathaniel Carter. It sits on about 5 acres of land at the edge of a quiet neighborhood called Riverside Meadows. Uncle Nate built it in the 70s, a simple cedar cabin with a stone chimney, tucked behind oak trees and a small creek. He used to call it the one place that still listens. That morning, I was just trying to listen, to the wind, to the quiet, to the start of something new. But apparently, someone else thought this land was theirs to control. The woman introduced herself as Marilyn Pierce, chairwoman of the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association. Behind her, a man in a reflective vest, Derek, began stringing yellow caution tape between my trees. "Sir," she said, "we've received reports of unauthorized occupancy on this property. We're here to conduct a compliance inspection." She said it like she was quoting from a police manual. I told her calmly, "This is private land. I just inherited it from my uncle, Nathaniel Carter." But she barely looked at me. Her assistant was busy hammering in a post, right next to my property line, with a metal sign that read, "Reserved for Chairwoman." That's when I started recording. Her tone, her gestures, the fake authority, I captured all of it. Because something about this didn't just feel wrong. It felt practiced. When I asked for identification, Derek fumbled with his vest, eyes darting like a student who forgot his homework. Marilyn raised her clipboard and snapped, "We are authorized volunteers under HOA regulations. You're in violation of Community Code 4.1. Violation." I looked around at my cabin, the weathered logs, the old chimney, the same porch my uncle built. Nothing had changed here in 50 years. It was then that I realized they weren't here to inspect anything. They were here to intimidate. I didn't argue. I just filmed as Derek tried to look official, and Marilyn rehearsed her authority lines like a local politician with a script. When they finally left, they left behind caution tape, a warning notice, and that ridiculous parking sign. The message was clear. This land might be yours, but the power here belongs to us. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of tires again. Not in the driveway this time, but somewhere out near the property line. When I looked through the window, I saw one of those same SUVs parked half in the ditch, facing my cabin like it was standing guard. Nobody was inside. But a few yards away, behind the oak trees, I caught a glimpse of a figure, blonde hair tied back, clipboard in hand. It was Marilyn. She wasn't knocking on my door anymore. She was watching. Every time I moved, from the porch to the shed, from the shed to the creek, she shifted position. Always behind something. Always within sight. It was like living inside a silent surveillance experiment. I wasn't paranoid. I knew what I saw. And deep down, I also knew, people who go that far to control something usually have something to hide. Around noon, I decided to walk the boundary. 5 acres doesn't sound like much, until you're actually walking it, through uneven ground, wild grass, and that creek that divides my land from the HOA's. That's when I noticed the pump house, an old wooden shed built decades ago, padlocked shut. My uncle had mentioned it once, years back, saying something about utilities access. When I checked the door, I saw a faint mark on the lock, fresh scratches, like someone had tried to open it recently. Back in the cabin, I rummaged through one of Uncle Nate's toolboxes and found a small ring of keys. Most were old and rusted. But one, a bronze key, fit the padlock perfectly. The door creaked open, and the smell of damp would hit me. Inside were pipes, electric conduits, and a filing cabinet. An actual metal filing cabinet, locked but dusty. After a few tries, another key opened it. Inside, I found dozens of documents, leases, receipts, official letters with county seals. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then, one word kept repeating across the pages. Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association, Facilities Lease Agreement. It took me a few minutes to piece it together. The HOA, the same group that just accused me of unauthorized occupation, had actually been paying rent to use this land. Not just the pump house, but the mailbox cluster by the road. My uncle had leased those facilities to them for a small monthly fee. And guess who signed those leases? That explained everything: the fake authority, the surveillance, the need to push me off the land. If I left, they could keep using the property without anyone questioning where the money went. I photographed every single page. Because I knew this wasn't just about my land anymore. It was about something bigger. Fraud, power, and the kind of arrogance that grows in quiet neighborhoods where nobody pushes back. Outside, the air had changed. Somewhere out by the trees, I heard movement, branches shifting, a quick intake of breath. I stepped out and called, "Marilyn, you still out there?" Silence. Then a flicker of motion behind the SUV. Yeah. She was still watching. But this time, I had something she didn't. Proof. That evening, my phone buzzed. The caller ID said Rebecca Shaw, a name I recognized from my uncle's old address book. She lived half a mile down the road, one of the few neighbors who had stopped by to welcome me when I first moved in. Her voice was low and careful. "David, I hope you don't mind me calling. I wanted to ask about what happened this morning. I saw the lights, the tape. Marilyn's SUVs." I told her everything: the fake inspection, the parking sign, the pump house. When I mentioned the lease papers, she went quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "David, I think I need to show you something too." The next morning, Rebecca arrived with a folder, neat, labeled, color-coded. Inside were spreadsheets, emails, and minutes from HOA meetings. She was the treasurer. "I've been keeping track of HOA expenses," she said, "and some of them don't make sense. There's money missing. Thousands." She flipped through the pages, stopping at one highlighted line. "Compliance patrol equipment, $2,500. She looked up at me. "Except, we've never approved that. Or bought anything like it." We compared notes, my photos, her documents. The pieces fit perfectly. The fake patrols, the radios, the flashing lights, all funded by unauthorized HOA money. Marilyn wasn't just pretending to have power. She was funding the performance with community dues. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. "This could get bad," she said softly. "If people find out, the whole board could be removed." "Maybe they should," I replied. 2 days later, a community discussion notice appeared on the HOA board, conveniently titled Neighborhood Safety Concerns. It didn't say my name, but everyone knew. Rebecca called that morning. "They're holding the meeting by the mailbox cluster, the one on your land." I almost laughed. "Perfect. Let's have it there." When I arrived, about 15 residents were gathered around, talking in hushed tones. Marilyn stood at the center, clipboard in hand, trying to look composed. Derek hovered nearby, wearing his reflective vest again, as if he didn't know when to quit. I waited until Marilyn started her speech, all the usual words about community standards and shared values. Then Rebecca raised her hand. "Marilyn," she said, "can you explain why our HOA budget includes a $2,500 purchase for compliance patrol equipment that was never approved by the board?" The crowd went still. Marilyn blinked, just once. "Those are operational expenses for community safety," she said quickly. "Really?" Rebecca replied. "Because there are also payments for property leases, on land that doesn't belong to the HOA." And just like that, the illusion cracked. I stepped forward then, calm but firm. Those facilities, the pump house, the mailboxes, they're on my land. I have the lease agreements right here. I pulled out printed copies, each signed by my uncle and Marilyn. You could feel the shift in the air, confusion turning into realization, realization into anger. Marilyn opened her mouth to respond, but the crowd no longer needed convincing. They had seen the truth. For years, she'd played the part of a small-town authority figure. Now, with a few sheets of paper, that stage collapsed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Because when people finally see the truth, silence does the talking. The next morning, I made a call to the county sheriff's office. Deputy Mark Lewis answered, a man whose voice carried that steady, no-nonsense calm of someone who's seen too much small-town drama. I explained everything, the fake patrols, the badges, the documents, the harassment. He didn't sound surprised. Yeah, he said, I've heard rumors about Riverside Meadows. I'll come by this afternoon. By 2 o'clock, his patrol truck pulled up beside my cabin. The real flashing lights, red and blue this time, cut across the porch. Not amber. Not pretend. Real authority. We walked the property together, the boundaries, the pump house, the mailbox cluster. I showed him everything. Then I told him about the meeting, the fake inspections, the financial records Rebecca had uncovered. He took notes quietly, the kind of notes that meant something was about to happen. All right, he said finally, let's give them a chance to play their part one last time. I didn't understand what he meant until half an hour later, when 2 familiar SUVs rolled up again, amber lights flashing like the world's saddest parade. Marilyn stepped out first, followed by Derek and another volunteer lugging radio equipment. They didn't notice the patrol truck parked near my porch. Mr. Carter, Marilyn called out, clipboard already raised, we're conducting a follow-up inspection per HOA enforcement procedure. Her tone was steady, rehearsed, confident, until the deputy cleared his throat behind me. Afternoon, he said, walking forward. Deputy Mark Lewis, County Sheriff's Office. Mind showing me your credentials, ma'am? For the first time since I'd met her, Marilyn's voice faltered. This is just a community inspection, officer. Nothing formal. Then why the badge? He asked, turning to Derek. Why the radios, the lights, the cones? Derek tried to stammer out something about certified compliance volunteer, but the words fell apart halfway. Deputy Lewis just nodded slowly. Son, impersonating law enforcement, even by accident, can land you in real trouble. The air went heavy. Marilyn looked at me, then at Rebecca, who had shown up with her folder of financial records. The deputy took her statement, copied the document numbers, and photographed the fake badges. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no arrests. Just quiet paperwork, the kind that ends a reign of pretend authority. 2 days later, the Riverside Meadows bulletin board at the local feed store became the most visited spot in town. Rebecca had posted a full financial breakdown, color-coded, signed, verified. It showed over $6,000 in unauthorized spending, fake patrol gear, unapproved fees, and lease payments on property the HOA didn't own. Marilyn resigned that evening. No speech. No farewell. Just a single printed note. Effective immediately, I resign as chairwoman of the Riverside Meadows HOA. A week later, I stood by the same mailbox cluster, now quiet, no lights, no tape, no false authority. The neighbors nodded as they passed, some embarrassed, others relieved. One man stopped and said, "Guess you taught us a thing or two about ownership, huh?" I smiled. Maybe just about boundaries. Because that's what this really was, not a story about property, but about lines. The kind drawn on paper, and the kind people cross when they forget what's theirs and what isn't. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, same as the morning it all began. The meadow was quiet again. No more flashing lights, no more clipboard commands. Just wind, wood, and peace. Last week, they tried to push me off my land with fake authority. This week, I took it back, not with anger, but with truth. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Real authority doesn't shout. It doesn't need flashing lights. It just stands quietly and lets the facts speak. A month passed. The yellow tape was gone. The pump house was mine again, legally, visibly, quietly. Rebecca and a few other residents had stepped up to rebuild the HOA board, this time with proper accounting and open meetings. The funny part? They asked me to join. I declined. I think I've done my time in politics, I told them, smiling. But I promised to share copies of every lease document and boundary map with the new treasurer. Transparency, after all, was the thing missing from all of this. Marilyn moved away quietly. Someone said she sold her house to pay restitution, others said she just couldn't face the neighbors anymore. I don't know which story is true, maybe both. Derek apologized once. He came by with his cap in hand, said he was just trying to help, that he thought they were doing something official. I believed him. He was just a man caught up in someone else's illusion. I shook his hand. Because truth isn't about revenge. It's about restoring balance. There's something about small communities that makes people forget the limits of power. Maybe it's the comfort, maybe the routine, the same faces, the same lawns, the same mailboxes. And over time, someone starts thinking they're the keeper of it all. But property lines aren't just about land. They're about respect. The moment you stop respecting boundaries, physical or personal, you start turning community into control. And control, without accountability, always becomes abuse. Sometimes, justice isn't loud. It doesn't need headlines or sirens. It just needs a man standing on his porch, holding a cup of coffee, and refusing to be moved by fear. My uncle used to say, the land doesn't belong to you. You belong to the land. I never really understood that until now. Because what he meant wasn't ownership, it was stewardship. To protect it. To know where it begins. And to make sure no one ever claims it in your name again. If you've ever lived under an HOA, you probably have a story of your own. Maybe it was a letter about your trash bins, or a fine for leaving your grass an inch too high. Or maybe, like me, it was something that went a little too far. Here's the truth, most rules start with good intentions. They just lose their soul when people start using them to feel important. And once that happens, power becomes performance. But performance can't survive when the audience stops clapping. So, if you're listening to this, remember. Ask questions. Keep records. Know your rights. Because sometimes the smallest stand you take can stop the biggest lie. Thanks for listening to Color is Not a Crime Stories. If this story reminded you of someone or something, hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more real tales of quiet justice. Until next time, I'll be right here, coffee in hand, watching the meadow breathe.